Welcome to Milton and King's On the Wall podcast, where we engage in conversations with artists, designers, and more. Today we speak with Richard Capp, co-founder and CEO of Milton and King. We hope you enjoy this conversation. If you do, please subscribe and consider leaving us a rating and review. Richard Capp, hello.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a Friday. I'm looking forward to the weekend, and I'm sure you're looking forward to the weekend as well, where you don't think about Milton and King, and you get your full weekend, and you don't think about work. Is that right?
That hasn't happened for a while. Yeah. I'd tell my wife that I don't think about work, but I do.
Yeah, of course. I'm joking, of course, because I know that you are the co-founder of Milton and King, and you don't get the luxury of doing that as an entrepreneur and as a business owner. You don't really get weekends. It kind of never ends for you. What I'm going to do, just full disclosure, obviously, this is the On the Wall podcast for Milton and King, so essentially it's your podcast that you're joining in on for the first time. And
long-time listener.
Yeah, long-time listener, first-time caller. And I'm going to pretend that I don't know you for the sake of the listeners, because I've known you for 7 to 8 years, and you're probably going to get lots of questions that I already know the answers to. But just for the sake of people who don't know you at all, I thought we would just get a little bit of background and just get a little bit of the story before I get into some other things.
All right.
So forgive me for asking you the obvious questions that I already know the answers to.
No, that's good.
So here we go. So just a little bit of background about where you grew up, where you're from, all that kind of stuff.
All right. So I grew up in Moree in New South Wales, in regional New South Wales, on a sheep and mixed farming operation that my parents ran. So I spent my youth, I guess, my childhood, running around outside with two brothers. I'm the middle boy, and yeah, we had a lot of fun. We grew up with Mum yelling at us to get outside, and usually if it wasn't too hot, that's what we did. So yeah,
Did you have any middle brother issues where, like, the oldest one gets all the attention, and then the middle one gets forgotten, and then the youngest one gets all the attention?
No, I don't think so.
No favoritism.
No. I think the other two would probably tell you that I was the favourite, but but no, I think we were all. I think I might have been in the middle, and I learned how to juggle both of them. We're all very close. There's only 2 years between us all. And there's only 18 months between Bryce and I. So we were pretty close. It wasn't like we had one, there was two of us and then one older brother or anything. It was all three were, and Mum had 3 under 3 when Bryce was born. So we're all pretty close.
So did you, were you born into that, or was it, did the family move to a farm at some point, or when you were born, you were like born on the farm?
No. So yeah, we were taken home from the hospital. I was born in Moree Base Hospital, and Moree's a thriving town of 10,000 people. Well, it was then. It's probably a bit smaller now. And yeah, we went home to the farm. Yeah.
So farm life and farm skills and all that kind of stuff. It's fair to say that you were like, that was instilled in you from, like, you didn't really know any other way.
No, we didn't know any other way. When we used to go to town on the weekends, as kids, we used to play soccer. So we went to a little primary school, which was just down the road, and it was a gravel road for half of it. And then we went to school at a little town called Palmalawar, which is very Australian. But then we would go to Moree on the weekends. That was a big thing. We were going off to town. So yeah, we were used to farm life, and Dad was always on the farm. Mum worked. She actually worked in town as a fashion teacher and as a textile teacher. She used to teach sewing and everything at the local college. Yeah, so we were definitely we grew up on the farm thinking farm life was it.
And so at that time, like when you were, I don't know, 10, 12 years old, what was your sort of aspiration at the time you were going to grow up and be like continue the farm business, the farm family business?
I guess I hadn't really ever thought about it, but you're a product of your surroundings, and at that stage, like all the kids at school were, their parents were farmers. But then when I was, we went to high school at a boarding school. So when I was 12, I went off to Toowoomba and became a boarder until Mum and Dad sold the farm when I was 15, and they actually ended up moving to Toowoomba, which was about 3.5 hours from where we had our farm. Yeah, and we lived in town, and I finished my last 2 years of school as a day boy. So I lived back at home with Mum and Dad.
And for a lot of people that don't understand, I understand a bit because I lived in Australia for a little bit. I feel like the idea of boarding schools in Australia are a bit different than maybe they would be in the U.S. or the U.K. even. Whereas it's a sort of a common thing because there are so many rural families, and so when they send their kids to school, because I guess there's not those like
Yeah, and
those would be the better
that's
schools.
yeah. So like I went to a boys' school, and pretty much an all boys school, boarding school. I think there was 400 and something boarders, and all of these guys were from farms out somewhere, Queensland, northern New South Wales, and they were there for pretty much the same reason everybody was there, and that was isolation. Um, when you're out in the middle of nowhere, it's hard to get an education. So we were sent off to school, um, hoping that would make for fine young gentlemen. I don't know whether that was always the outcome, but that was our parents' wish. But
Yeah.
yeah, so we were all in the same boat, really.
So
All homesick too.
when the family moved to Toowoomba, then was that leaving the farm behind?
Yeah, yeah. Mum and Dad sold the farm. Dad was a farmer without a farm for a while. So yeah, we they moved to Toowoomba and sort of got into other things. Yeah, and there was no more farming life for Mum and Dad. When I left school, I actually went off and worked for farmers, driving tractors and chasing cattle and doing all those things until I was in my early 20s, and then I went off and studied accounting. I thought I needed a bit of a change from rural life. So yeah, I went and did a diploma of accounting, and then I deferred university and ended up going travelling. So
So did you just find that you had a natural inclination with numbers and math and things like that?
well, from memory, I probably failed maths at school. Not because I was bad at maths, probably I just wasn't, probably the best listener at school. So, but yeah, I'm very much more of a numbers person. I think, well, anyone that's read anything that I've written knows that I'm probably better at maths.
So, you mentioned your mom was like a fashion teacher and had background in textiles. Did that, looking back now, did that have any influence on you at all?
Well, you don't think it does, but probably when we were starting the business, you're always going to Mum, who had the creative side, for what do you think? What are your thoughts on this? Um,
Hmm.
so, I guess when you're a kid, it doesn't because you're not really thinking about it. But yeah, as it's definitely come in. Like even now, I was talking to Bryce yesterday, and he said that he'd had Mum in to look at something. So still 14 years down the track, she's still the reference.
Yeah, and you mentioned Bryce, so we should probably mention Bryce is your brother and the co-owner of Milton and King, who you started the company with. Um, so when you bring up his name, people know who you're talking about. Um, and Bryce, you would say is I right the more artsy, creative side of the business?
Yeah, so Bryce runs the creative side. He'd studied graphic design and visual communication, and I kind of, when we started in business, I felt that he needed my assistance, which is kind of how we started our partnership. I'd had a bit of a sales background after I'd studied, so I had a bit more of a numbers and probably a bit better on the phone. And I thought Bryce needed my assistance, and that's how we actually started in business. So it was
Now,
definitely.
did he think he needed your assistance, or did you think he
Oh, I
needed your
think we
assistance?
both agreed that he probably needed my assistance.
Okay,
So he'd probably tell a different story, but
I'll get that story later.
yeah. So we ended up, we started in our late 20s. We sort of joined forces, not having a clue about what we were going to do, except try and sell some of Bryce's services as a graphic designer, and that's kind of how we started in business together.
Yeah, so it started with what canvas prints and like stuff that he would
Well,
make.
it started off, he'd been overseas for a while, and he came back and he had this gig designing a magazine. But then Bryce had great dreams of printing canvas prints because he'd seen some guy doing it and thought that's a business we should be introducing. So we went down that path for a while. Figured out how to make canvas prints. I was the guy on the frames, stretching all the canvas prints, and we'd managed to get ourselves a printer, and then we were selling some pictures and stuff on to local designers doing display homes and stuff like that.
And so, at what point does wallpaper become the thing?
We had a friend who was working in retail, and he thought he could sell some, and he asked us about it, and we were like, right, well, it's not really something we could actually produce at the time, but we went down the path, and we thought, right, well, let's do our homework on it, and then Bryce also designed a brochure that had a wall mural in it, and people started asking, how do I get that? To be honest, we were asking the same question: how do we get that? So we had to figure out how to print it, and that took a bit of working out. And then the way we were printing it wasn't the right way to be printing it. So then again, that took a bit more trying to figure out until we got to 2012, and we kind of registered Milton and King as a brand and started producing collections of wallpaper.
How much thought went into the name? Like, did you guys argue about it, or was there like
Well, no,
aha moment or something?
we'd started off as IMGS custom wall coverings, and we had been running as that for a few years, and we'd been doing custom murals for interior designers and things like that.
What's IMGS?
It was just a
What
funky
is?
way of spelling images
Oh, okay,
because
gotcha.
it was all pretty much based on photographic elements of stuff. So then we Milton and King, we decided, right, how do we scale it? How do we sound like we know what we're doing? And so we ended up joining mum and dad's middle names, and we came up with Milton and King. So it sounds very regal, but yeah, that's where it actually comes from.
And was there like how much thought was put into that? Was it Did you guys toil over the name for a long time, or was it just like kind of like an obvious thing to the both of you?
Well, no, it was. We talked about it for a little bit, but no, we settled on it pretty quickly. Mum and dad have been helping out with pretty much every step in terms of trying to figure out. Like we started in business, we had no idea. So the first thing's like, Mum, how do you do this? Or Dad, how do you do this? And their support had really sort of helped us keep on track. And yeah, so it was like Mum and Dad's middle names. That sounds like a pretty good way to go.
At that time, when you were doing those wall murals, were you did you already sort of have that part figured out by then? Like, what sort of paper and where do you source the paper from and who's actually doing the printing and all that kind of stuff? Did you have all that figured out?
Yeah, we did. We had so when we started, you couldn't really buy blank wallpaper base, for example, in Australia. No one was really trying to print wallpaper locally. there was a few guys doing some screen printing and stuff like that. But yeah, everyone was pretty. They weren't about to tell us where they got their paper from. But I managed to find a latex reinforced paper, which was sort of coming out of the US. So we started with that, and it had been used for internal, for shop fit out murals and things like that, so advertising stuff. So that was a good way for us to start. It was a wet strength paper, so when you were hanging it, it didn't just fall apart; it actually stayed together. So that was pretty good. But it did expand and it did all those things of old school wallpaper. But when we started, we had the wrong ink type in our first printer, so we used to have to spray. I had an air compressor set up with my mask on, and I'd be spraying all the wallpaper and in the garage. It was but it worked. It worked, and then I was like, right, how do we get the right product base to be able to roll this out? So at that stage, non-woven wall covering was making a bit of was starting to make an impact in Europe, where they were starting to replace your traditional just paper with a non-woven. So it has fibres in it that add strength, which means that it doesn't expand when it gets wet and all those things. So that'd help both installing and removing. When you go to remove it, it doesn't just come in 1,000 parts. It comes off as sheets. So I was like, right, we need to get our base right and our ink right and all those type of things, which we'd kind of sorted out by that stage, by 2012.
But it sounds to me like there's a lot of research and trial and error and time that goes into that. I'm guessing that in figuring all this out, there was probably it would sound to me like there were a lot of like mess ups, for lack of a better term. Like,
oh yeah,
you're sitting there printing, and are you basically having what you just printed just fall apart and going like, oh my god, what do we do?
Yeah, there was like, I remember when we first started, I think everything we sent out, you pretty much wait for the installer to ring and tell you there was an issue. And it may not have been an issue, but it might have been, oh, it's not quite lining up. And I guess it's probably an Australian thing, but everyone likes to tell you you've made a mistake. And the installers were no different. But most of them, once you got them on the phone, they were like, right, well, I think I can save this and make it happen. So from that happening at the start, it was just vital for us to like, right, how do we get a bulletproof product where once it goes out, we're not getting phone calls to say that there's a problem with it, or the ink's running off, or it's each drop's a different length, and all those types of things. And that was, so there's a lot of trial and error to get our product right. But
and I'm guessing a lot of money wasted.
Oh,
too,
heaps,
right?
Plenty. We weren't making a cent. It was costing us more to produce rolls of wallpaper than what we were getting for it. But at that stage, it was like, this has got potential. People are buying it. It's expensive. So people want it. Let's just figure out how to do it. And I had my commercial brain on. I was like, how do we compete? Like, how do these other guys do it? They can produce it for next to nothing. How is it possible? So it really was just and there's no website to go to with a step-by-step how do you print wallpaper. We really had to figure
that's
it
what
out.
That leads me to two questions then. One is, well, first, at any point when all the errors and stuff were happening, were you at any point going like, all right, maybe we're not cut out for this. We should just like hang this up. This is a bad idea.
Yeah, all the time. It's just lucky there was two of us, because I'd quit on one day and Bryce would quit on the other, and we'd go and pull each other out and say, no, listen, there's potential here. We've got to keep cruising. But it took a lot of, we didn't have any money, so we're bootstrapping the whole thing, and you think, oh, there's some money coming in, I've got that, and then there might be an error, or you've got to do this, and so it was just, it was a slog. But we were hiding away and didn't have much of a social life, and we're just trying to figure out how to make it work.
And like you said, there was no YouTube or anything to try to figure out how to do anything. So how did you figure it out?
Well, I really got sort of on the mission of trying to work out where the big guys in Europe, like the big wallpaper factories, where do they get their paper from? And will that paper work with our technology? Because at that stage, everybody was very much analog. You know, you were crazy if you were going to try and print 10-metre rolls on a little digital printer, which we were trying to do because we weren't trying to reinvent the industry. We were just trying to come into it. So we were trying to make sure everything was an industry standard, you know, like the size of our rolls and all those type of things. So it was a lot of trying to find the paper, and then to get the cost down on the paper, we had to buy a certain amount. So it was, but we got there.
So how did you figure that out though? Did you actually call these places up, or how did you figure out what they used?
I pretty much I just spent what seems like months researching, just looking at every type of printer, researching paper mills, and then somehow I got onto this mill in Germany that would sell us paper, and he sent us a trial, and it worked with the type of printer we were using. And everybody was saying you can't use a digital printer with this type of paper, but to get the cost down, we had to use an analog conventional paper. So, and it just happened to work. So I didn't tell our suppliers for years that we were actually using digital printers, because as soon as you say the word digital, the price went up. So,
why is that?
Well, because most digital prints back then were used for murals, and it had a lot more margin in it, so they could charge you a lot more. I'd found a paper that we were using for some time, for example, and it used to come through a distributor because the distributor had the rights to Australia. So I had to go to the distributor and say, you've got the rights to this paper, can you bring some in for me? And he turned around and said, well, how many pallets do you want? So I had to commit to a certain amount of paper, but he just put his margin in there. So, and then he turned around and said, why aren't you selling more? I'd be like, well, people can buy rolls of wallpaper for what you're selling me the base paper for. So it was all about figuring out how to scale. And that's why we started doing custom murals. So that enabled us to sort of start to get the volume up. But there was, it was very hands-on. You were talking one wall at a time, and you couldn't get big volume when you're doing such a service kind of project.
When you're ordering this paper and you're having it, brought in from or the distributors bring it in from Europe, and you're finding out that these big companies, this is what they're using. At any point, is there a time where you go, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, you're trying to get started and you already know that there's these huge companies doing it. So what was really the angle that you thought, oh, this is going to be a path to success? Is it because you're giving it to Australia and you figure there's nothing happening in Australia, or what, you know what I mean? Like, you have these huge wallpaper companies. Where's there room for you to do anything?
Yeah, well, we were crazy, weren't we? I don't know if we were crazy. I think we started off on that digital model. Like, in our heads, it was like, right, well, the only way we can compete with these big guys is not carry any stock and then produce it all on demand. And that was our idea from the go, from very early on. That's how we were going to do it. We couldn't afford to set up a wallpaper design. We didn't have that much money to set up one design using analog systems, like, having cylinders made and running out of minimum, 120 rolls or something like that of one colour. That wasn't an option for us. So we had to figure out, right, how can we launch a collection into the market, not have any stock, and print it all on demand. So that was our thinking. And it was crazy because pretty much every wallpaper that's available worldwide is pretty much available in Australia. Like, there's either someone importing it or someone will send it out to you. So you think, oh, it's so far away, but everything's available there. So, and it's pretty cheap. So here we are trying to compete in what is a really small market, but it's saturated with product. So, yeah, we were probably very, very naive, but we just thought there's a way to introduce some new designs, do it all on demand, which means we can really launch collections really easily, and have a lower startup cost for that.
So essentially it was what started out of necessity, because you didn't have the money to do it, ended up being sort of the flag that you now carry.
Yeah.
As a brand, being on demand and, quick turnarounds and not keeping stock. Like, that's That's the through line from then till
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
But it was, whereas then it was, you had to because there was no other way. And now it's something that you champion.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We've been lucky to be able to, spend 10 years really, or longer, 12 years, I guess, really getting that system right, where we can take an order and spit it out within a couple of days, and it's fairly cost effective. And now the rest of the markets, everybody's got a digital division, who doing similar things, but we're actually in the market. We started off as little outsiders with no money and absolutely no idea about the wallpaper industry, and now we can say, I guess, that we're competing in it.
Do you think there was anything about being in Australia that was a benefit to you? Like, was it, was being in Australia sort of, I guess there's nothing that's all bad and all good. I mean, obviously it presented its own challenges, like you said, because it's a smaller market. And I'm guessing at the time you were primarily just selling to Australia in the very, very, very beginning.
Yeah, like if we used to say we're in the wrong country, and it didn't matter who we told at the start. It was like, wallpaper. What the hell are you doing? Is that a thing? And we used to say, oh, we're in the wrong market. Like, if we'd been around the corner from, or in the same country as at least a paper mill, that would have been handy. We had to buy a certain amount of paper because you had to put it on a ship for 3 months and hope by the time it got there it was going to work. So if we'd been in Europe or the UK, we'd been able to, probably grow it a lot faster than what we have.
But would you think there were any benefits, though, to starting in Australia?
Well, we were probably, we were very well hidden away from everybody else in terms of trying to get it right. We weren't on display to show our failures, I guess. Once we got the system kind of right, we then, it's enabled us to roll out the system again, like in the US, for example.
Yeah. So you felt like you were able to work out all the kinks and mistakes and stuff like that,
Yeah,
without sort of being
prying eyes. Yeah, there was definitely, and that's right. Like, there was, getting the product right and trialing it and figuring it all out like that. It takes a lot of time, and you'd say it takes a lot of money, but we didn't have any money, so it was more about, we were just kind of toiling away and just trying to keep everything going whilst we figured out how to get the product right.
Did you feel like that either you or Bryce had foresight into the potential of the digital way of doing things, or was it just entirely necessity?
Oh no, I think it was definitely foresight. Like, we would talk right at the start when we got our very first printer. It was like, right, this is how we copy this. We put digital printers around the world and we can launch collections. And that was our initial thought. Then once you start using those printers, you realise how slow they are and that you're never going to pay the wage to run things. So that was about, right, how do we get the numbers up? But the system's it's still the same now, like 10 years down the track. The concept's still the same. We've just got bigger printers.
Do you think that the technology's gotten any better in that time?
Yeah, tenfold. It's when we started, it was the HP latex came out, which is what a lot of people use for wallpaper printing because it doesn't have a smell and things like that. And that didn't exist when we first started printing wallpaper. We were using a water-based printer, and then we had to lock the ink in to stop it from running when it was installed. Make it wipeable and cleanable and all those things. And then they produced this new printer, and the printer guy came along to us and said, this is what you need, this will print. And I'm like, yeah, this will print wallpaper because it's meant to be waterproof. But it wasn't waterproof. The marketing team always gets in front of the development team, and it wasn't perfect, but it did the job. So that was the first start. But then as years of, a decade later, that technology is far better than what it was. You get Series 1 to Series whatever they're at now. The technology's enabled it. But with that, it enables a lot of other people to come into the market. So there's a lot more players than what were around.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember what, like, the first sort of big job you had that kind of gave you hope that you were like, this could this could go okay.
Yeah, we did the. Now it's funny because Bryce has actually just done the history of Milton and King, which he put on the website, and I tend not to. I tend not to think about it really. But I went back through it all, and I saw one of the pictures of one of the first jobs, which was a job at the Noosa Surf Club. And if anybody's ever been to Noosa, they know the Noosa Surf Club. But and it was in the foyer. You walk up the stairs at the entrance. We did a custom mural there. Yeah, and there was a couple of errors on install, but our paper hanger, Ian, managed to make it look good. And yeah, that was our first job. We were very proud of that one because lots of friends used to go to the Noosa Surf Club and they could see it. So that was pretty cool.
You're trucking along and working things out and figuring out how to make it all right. And I guess in some ways that's a process that never really ends, right? I mean, I suppose finding the best bases and the best printers and stuff. That seems like something that you still even do now.
Yeah. We do. Like I still do. I still watch lots of videos and stuff on new technology that comes out, and but we've got a system. We've got a system now that works for our in our general manufacturing. I think more what I look at now is add-ons to our product ranges. So if I'm looking at a base paper, for example, it would never be to replace what we currently have. It would be to add on to it. Like we've got a base paper that we use in both of our factories now, in Australia and in the US. And we're about to roll it out by the time this airs, probably in Europe. We're going to be producing in 3 factories. So we've got this one base paper with the type of printer we use, and it gives us a really good constant. It doesn't matter where you buy our product, you'll get exactly the same quality anywhere in the world. So that we have locked in. And then if we're looking at specialty papers and things like that, it might be short run or just special products produced on.
At what point do you see that more sales are happening in the U.S. and where all of a sudden it makes, like, now that's actually, you think, oh, we should probably be in the U.S.
Once we launched it online and we put prices against everything, we started to see where the inquiry was coming from, and it was all US.
So that was immediate. Once the website went up, immediately there was just more interest from the U.S. than
Yeah, it was. Well, it wasn't immediate. It immediately came in. Inquiry came in. We couldn't ship at that stage. We weren't exporting. We were trying to figure out how to do that. But yeah, we had inquiry. How do I buy this here? How do I buy that there? And then we managed to get a reseller in Japan who really sort of introduced us to exporting. And that was when we were trying to figure out how to box it up and ship it out and how to do it and not make it, $1,000 a roll. And we sort of started that and then just kept rolling out. And then the US got bigger and we figured out how to service that.
Yeah. And then, so at what point do you decide one of us needs to
go? Well, when was it? 2016. We opened an office in Austin, and we'd had a couple of Bryce and I. We'd been exporting into the US, not a lot, but enough to warrant a trip over to see what it was all about. And I think at that stage I'd been to the US once in my life, and so Bryce and I jumped on an airplane. We went to New York for a week, and we checked it out. And went, no, this isn't going to be the exact right spot. Whilst everybody uses wallpaper, it's probably based on the East Coast. We wanted somewhere that was a bit easier to get to, wasn't completely odd time frames, and also similar to where we'd been. So we ended up in Austin. At that stage, Austin was the place to be moving to. So we moved to Austin, and we opened a little sampling room. Customer service office, and we'd been there until Christmas 22, I guess, 21. Yeah, start of last year.
And so at that time it was just sampling, and you were still shipping everything.
Yeah, everything was shipping from Australia up until about 14 months ago, when we opened up we moved from Austin to Dallas, and we opened up production in Dallas. So throughout the whole pandemic, everything was shipped out of Australia. We were very fortunate that we didn't lose our international shipping. The prices went through the roof, but we managed to stay in business, and we saw a jump in our online sales because everybody was at home and doing up offices and doing all those things. So we saw a jump in sales, but our cost of delivering goods went through the roof, and it was like, right, how do we make the most of this? And it was all about producing locally, so that enabled us to step across and set up a couple of printers.
So when you moved to the U.S., were there anything that took you by surprise? Anything that shocked you, whether either in business or culturally or anything like that?
Well, business was always, I was busy trying to learn business in Australia, and then you throw in another country into the mix, and you try and learn all the rules and regulations and taxes and everything for a new market. So that was, you end up with two accountants and just trying to, and then you arrive here in the US and you've got no bank account or anything, all those things. So it was a really big learning curve, but one we're definitely glad we did. But yeah, it takes a long time to start to figure all those things out.
Well, because you not only have to find a bank account, you have to deal with all the personal things too, right? You have to get your, I don't even know. Do you have is it a green card?
Yeah, so I have
passports?
I have a visa. I have a business visa to be in the US, which is what I had when we first set up the office. And then that expired. We were going to come back right before the pandemic, and so that canned us for another 2 years. And then we had, my wife and I have two girls, both born in Australia. And when the pandemic hit, we only had one, and then we thought, right, we'll stay. We ended up having Charlotte, and then when Charlotte was born, it was like, right, we're going to get on a plane. So we jumped on a plane when Charlotte was 12 weeks old, which is ridiculous, but you just got to do these things.
And so the kids are how old now?
Well, Olivia is about to turn 4, and Charlie's 18 months. Well, she'll be 2 next birthday.
Yeah. And how do you feel like that either changed you or changed, I mean, and by extension changed the business?
I think like it definitely changes. It changes your level of risk. I think that's a big one. When you're single and it's only you, your level of risk is pretty high. And like Bryce was married before me, and he was a father before I was. So you could see, like, when I wasn't, his level of risk and stuff was changing, and his where he wanted to be wasn't at work where I wanted to be. So becoming a father changes that. It changes your work-life balance, and that's probably a big benefit to work, is that you actually take some time out of the office or away from it, and that ends up inspiring you more. But then it also puts the amount of you've got your family's safety and your family's future and security to think about. But I think seeing the family just changes how you look at. You can go and spend time in the park, and while you're walking along, you might think of something that you hadn't actually thought of while you're toiling away in front of your computer. So I guess it just changes it changes your lifestyle, which can change the way you think.
So getting into the wallpaper just a little bit, like the designs and that aspect of it, do you have a favorite? Do you have a collection that, as being, you're the numbers guy and you're kind of handling the business management of the company, but are there designs that really speak to you, or how do you look at the wallpaper in that sense? Are there like other designs you get really excited about, or?
Oh, there are.
Are you more just on the business side?
No, there are. But we've got so many designs that target so many different markets. So depending on what you're doing, what the project might be, whether it's a bathroom in a nightclub, or it's your daughter's bedroom. So I guess I like we've got, what have we got, 700 and something designs, and there's colorways and options. I really like. I suppose I really like to see how people use them. I look at designs and go, wow, that's awesome. But it's not until you actually see somebody use it in their project that you really see how good it can be,
Mm-hmm.
or how well it can be used. So, yeah, I don't really have a favourite because we produce so much. I tend not to. I tend not to hook onto one as such.
I think one of the things that makes Milton and King unique is the number of independent artists that you work with from all over the world. Who was the first person to sign on outside of Bryce, and how did you make that happen? And yeah.
Well, originally Bryce started designing everything, and we had a very much a collection that had looked like it had been designed by a 30-year-old male. That wasn't really in the interior design business. And then we decided that we needed to add some different styles. So Bryce created a collection that he called Wallpaper Republic, and that was about inviting all these artists that actually had weren't textile designers, more graphic designers, I guess, from all over the world that were doing different stuff. And so yeah, the first designers we've still got a few of them. Jonathan Kalugi was one of our first ones. I think he's Italian. We had a Brazilian guy, we had a French girl, we had these artists from all over the place, and we had Jared Nickerson. He was part of it. He did a lot of vector art. All these guys from without the, they were more of the marketing industry than advertising industry than they were textiles. So,
How did you get them involved? Did just Bryce reach out, or you
Bryce
reach
just
out?
reached out to them all and said, "Listen, I love what you do. Would you like to design wallpapers?" And that's kind of how that first collection came about.
Oh,
He still does the same thing. He still finds people he likes and reaches out to them that way.
yeah. And so by the time you're reaching out to artists, I'm guessing because Bryce had already, produced his own wallpaper, he had to sort of learn, the craft or the art of actually making patterns repeatable. And
Yeah, he spent hours with some
yeah,
artworks trying to make them blend and make them seamless. And yeah, there's a lot of work went into getting files to work as wallpaper.
do you ever obviously Bryce and you have different roles in the business? Do you ever find that are there boundaries that get crossed now and then? Like, is he, is it, or do you encourage that? Do you encourage Bryce to get involved into the the numbers and the business management aspect? And do you ever kind of go in and comment on the designs and that kind of stuff? Or do you kind of does everybody sort of know their strengths and weaknesses and you just sort of let each
Well,
other be?
we know we sort of started off with our strength now, and very much you can do that, I'll do this kind of role. But I guess as we've grown, and we've grown just in the fact that Bryce has also learnt so much in his role, and his role's changed. Like his role is now more numbers because once you get down that e-commerce path, they start talking numbers rather than design. So. For years, we used to look at who's gonna. We need a marketing guru. Bryce is like, we need a marketing guru, and I'm like, well, the only way it's going to happen is for you. So, and that's pretty much what happened. He just decided one day that he was going to become the marketing guru, and he just learnt how to do it. He learnt how to run e-commerce sites and what was needed. So, a lot of work went into that, and with that comes a lot of data back. And he's learned how to look at the data, and we now look at ad spends, and we look at financials and stuff together. He's definitely not just creative and says make it work. It's definitely more of a combined. And now that we've separated, Bryce runs the Australian side. He's definitely picked a lot more of that up. So he's moved a bit more of the creative. I definitely haven't moved into it. I'm still doing the numbers side on my side, but yeah, he's probably moved a bit on his.
Well, I guess that's one of the things that stands out about Milton and King, and we get a lot of customer response from, is the the voice of the brand and how it feels so personal. Um, and it's you have your email signature or whatever on the email marketing and things like that. I guess it's really because it's Bryce or you doing it.
Yeah,
So it's not outsourced.
no, and it was, it's us on the chat. Like you, I don't know how many chats you've answered, but yeah, like it was. We were doing our own chat. Like we spoke to we if you called our brand, we spoke back to you. And when there was only four of us, that's what we were doing, wasn't it? So we were a very small team, and we spoke direct to the clients. And I guess nothing's really changed. We're still there talking to people.
Is there the temptation at all to, I suppose as you get bigger, is there the temptation to use chatbots and
No,
have somebody when they call get say press one for.
I think we need maybe the press one, but that's only to go to other people now. Now because the one person that answers the phone's pretty busy. Um, no, I don't think there's yes, they're super smart and all the rest of this. It doesn't take much to answer the phone and talk someone through something and know that a chatbot can't walk out the back and fix an error if there's one, or add another sample to a package, or change an address by walking out the back and telling somebody to do it. So I really like how quickly a person can make things happen. And yes, you can probably automate these things to do it, but we're not that automated. We're only small. We're still rolling your wallpaper and putting it in a box. It's not a robot doing it. So and especially when it comes to artwork, like we're looking at this AI and all these images that can be created, and I've already had people write out to us saying, "Oh, would you be interested in this? We can create artwork in seconds, and the clients can do it and all that sort of stuff." Well, that's not us. We're not at that point. There'll probably be 1,000 people offering it in a few years' time. Custom wallpapers designed by you, but that's not us. We design and curate our collections, and yeah, we're not there.
On an average day, what would you say is kind of are there any 2 days that are the same? Like is it always changing from day to day?
Um, it's the average day. My day, I guess, is changing a little bit to what it used to be, because we used to get hands on. I used to run the printer, and I used to run chat. I used to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and answer chats and pretend I wasn't asleep and all those things. But my days now are more about how do we continue to grow? How do we continue to innovate pretty snazzy products? How do we increase our market so that we are offering everywhere and all those things? So I guess my day now is I'm kind of thinking about those. I'm a bit more strategic in my thinking. What's the best way to grow? And then the other side to it is that you've got to grow in time. And we always have. We've been sales funded. So you can't just get out there and say, "Oh, we're going to do this," because you haven't got the money to do it. So you've got to wait and think about these things. How am I going to step it out? So I guess my days now are a bit more about, all right, what's the next step? What does the timeline look like? Who's going to do it? That's one of the big challenges is finding staff when you haven't got a huge budget for staff. So all of those type of things, that's kind of what my day looks like.
And so it's very much big picture.
Yeah, and it always has been, but I've been doing the other stuff while I've been shrinking rolls of wallpaper, or doing whatever whilst I was thinking about it. But I guess now I've probably got a bit more time to really sit down and actually try and really think it out a lot more. And now I'm fortunate enough to now be in the States. I can actually meet some people in the industry and see what they're doing and see how we can do things together and those type of things. So that I really enjoy that.
Are there any upcoming plans that you're excited about that you can talk about, or
Top
are they
secret.
top secret? Anything that's around the corner that you're particularly excited
We
about?
have there's I'm an open book, but I do have something that is top secret, so I can't talk about that. But I do know it's going to be really handy for our client base. which is exciting. So hopefully that'll happen in the next 6 months. We do have, by the time this airs, we should have our little window display in Chelsea Harbour in London. So that's exciting to be in with the trade leaders.
Yep.
And we're expanding our wholesale markets here in the US, in Australia, and in the UK and Europe now. So that's really good. That's a world we haven't been able to play in. So now we can, support retailers who are also wanting to sell wallpaper. So there's lots happening.
Well, lots of people have different tastes in wallpaper, but where do you feel like Milton and King exists in a way that's sort of unique from everybody else?
Well, I think we've always really strived to bring a designer wall covering, a really high quality wallpaper to the market at a decent price point. So, there's wallpaper out there you can pay $1,000 a square metre for, and it's absolutely beautiful. But their market's pretty small. They're not our market, And there's also wallpaper that you can go and buy for $40 a roll in Target. We can't compete with that because we can't produce for that price. So our market is, and I think we are quite cost effective. But our market's somebody that wants something that's a little bit different to what the general market does, and I think we do that. We can offer pretty unique designs at a certain price point, so at a fairly affordable price point. So that's kind of our market. Our market, I think, is getting bigger as we evolve, but it definitely started off a bit more kind of out there artwork, but it's starting to get broader.
Right. Well, it's definitely, interesting to see the company grow and Milton and King is definitely getting a lot more exposure in different areas, and, everyone from, HGTV television shows using it to, celebrities to your sort of, it's getting in the consciousness and in the mind of sort of your average person, where people are, when they think of wallpaper, they're starting to think, Milton and King, right away. So that must, make you feel like you've really accomplished something.
Well, I guess it makes us, and when you look back at it, I guess it's funny when you look back at it because you think, wow, it's just so much work, and it was just took so long, and as every entrepreneur wants stuff to happen quickly. But yeah, looking at it now, it's interesting. Like people walk into the showroom and they've got all your products saved on their phone and they want to see it. And, that's really pretty cool. So it is. It's great to see. I really like seeing how people use our products because I've always been fascinated with really cool design. And now you look at really cool design online and it might have your wallpaper in it. So, it's exciting. It's exciting to see that, how people use your products.
I've taken up an hour of your time.
I could talk all day about this, Chris.
I'm sure your wife knows all about that.
She's sick of hearing it.
Yeah. So I'll let you go get back to
what I'm doing,
handling the biz, and thank you for jumping on here with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Giving everybody just a little bit of a glimpse of one of the main dudes behind Milton and King. So
thank you.
We'll probably catch up with you at some point in the future and see how things are going. And until then,
over and out.
I'll probably talk to you in about 5 minutes.
Thanks, Chris. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, Rich.
See ya. Bye.
See ya.